When an email lands in your inbox claiming to be from your bank, your boss, or a service you use, you mostly just believe it. The name is right, the logo is right, it looks like every other message from them, but stop and ask the strange question almost nobody asks. How does the inbox actually know that message came from who it says it did? For most of email's life, the honest answer was that it did not know at all. Email was born in an age of trust between a handful of people who all knew each other, and it was built with no way to prove who sent anything. That original flaw never fully went away, and the hidden machinery that now tries to patch it quietly in the fraction of a second before a message reaches you is one of the most important and least understood systems on the entire internet. The original sin? Start with the flaw at the heart of it, because everything else is a response to this. When a message is sent, the part that says who it is from is by itself just text. Anyone can write anything there. There is nothing in the basic design of email that stops a stranger from typing your bank's exact address into the from line and sending a message that on the surface looks completely genuine. It is the equivalent of a letter where the return address is simply whatever the sender felt like writing, with no postmark, no checking, no proof. For decades, that was the reality, and it is the soil the entire world of fake senders and impersonation grew out of. Why this matters? This single gap is the foundation of an enormous amount of online harm. The message that pretends to be your bank asking you to confirm your details. The urgent note that looks like it came from your own company asking for a payment. The receipt that looks like a service you actually pay for, carrying a link that goes somewhere it should not. Every one of these works precisely because email, left to itself, cannot tell the receiver whether the claimed sender is real. The impersonator is not breaking into anything. They are simply exploiting the fact that the system was never designed to ask for proof in the first place. So the question became unavoidable. If the from line cannot be trusted, how can a receiving inbox ever decide whether to believe a message claiming to be from a particular domain? And it has to decide this without the sender's cooperation, in an instant, for billions of messages a day. The answer that slowly emerged is not one fix, but three layers that work together, each covering a weakness the others leave open. No single one of them is enough alone. And that is the point. They were designed to overlap. The first patch, the first layer, answers a narrow question: for a given domain, which servers are actually allowed to send mail on its behalf? The owner of a domain can publish a public list out in the open, naming the specific machines permitted to send for it. Think of it as a domain pinning a notice to its own front door, readable by anyone, that says, "These are the only places my mail ever comes from." When a message arrives claiming to be from that domain, the receiver can look up that published list and check whether the server that actually delivered the message is on it. If a message claims to come from a domain but was sent by some machine that domain never authorized, that is an immediate red flag. The elegance is that nothing secret is involved. The list is public on purpose because its power comes not from hiding but from being the domain's own official word about who speaks for it. It is a simple, powerful idea. The domain gets to declare publicly, "Here are my real senders," and everyone else is suspect. But it has a blind spot worth naming. It vouches for the delivering server, not for the message, which is why a second layer was needed. The signature, the first layer, checks the sending server, but it does not protect the message itself, so a second layer goes deeper. When a legitimate mail system sends a message, it can attach a cryptographic signature, a kind of sealed wax stamp calculated from the contents of the message using a secret key only the real domain holds. The matching public key is published openly, so any receiver can verify the seal. If the signature checks out, two things are proven at once. The message really was signed by something holding the domain's secret key, and the contents have not been altered in transit, because even a single changed character would break the seal. This matters because mail passes through many hands on its way to you, and any of them could, in principle, tamper with it. The seal makes tampering visible. It is the difference between trusting a return address and trusting a tamper-proof wax stamp pressed with a signet ring only the real sender owns. And unlike the first layer, this one travels with the message itself, so it survives being forwarded and relayed across the internet, still provable at the far end, the policy on top. Now there are two checks, but a gap remains. What should a receiver actually do when one of them fails? Is a failure a reason to bin the message, to quietly flag it, or to let it through anyway? The third layer lets a domain answer that question itself, publicly. The domain owner publishes a policy that says, in effect, if a message claims to be from me, but fails these checks, here is what I want you to do with it, up to and including reject it outright. It also asks receivers to send back reports on what they are seeing, so the domain owner can watch for impersonation attempts across the whole internet. This is the layer that turns two technical tests into an enforceable rule with teeth. The receiver's side, so picture the moment a message arrives at a large mail provider. In a fraction of a second before you ever see it, the receiver runs all three checks. Did the message come from a server the domain authorized? Does the cryptographic seal verify against the domain's published key? And what has the domain told the world to do if these fail? All of this happens silently, billions of times a day, a vast invisible verification running constantly under every inbox on Earth. The result of those checks heavily influences whether the message reaches you, lands in spam, or vanishes entirely, and you never see any of it. There is no stamp on the message saying it passed, no visible report of the trial it went through. The whole apparatus is built to be invisible when it works, which is precisely why almost nobody knows it is running at all. The only time most people sense it is when something fails and a message they expected never arrives. The alignment, there is a subtle trap here that makes the system stronger than it first appears. A clever impersonator might pass a check technically while still lying about who they are by getting a message validly signed or sent from a domain they do control while displaying a completely different, trusted name in the part you actually read. So the strict version of these rules demands alignment. The domain that passes the technical checks has to match the domain shown to you as the sender. It is not enough to pass a test for some domain, you have to pass it for the domain you are claiming to be. That requirement closes the gap between technically valid and actually honest. Reputation, layered on top of all of this, is something softer but just as decisive. Reputation. Large receivers keep an enormous, constantly updated picture of how each sending domain and server has behaved over time. Does this sender normally send the kind of mail people want? Has it suddenly started blasting huge volumes after months of silence? Do recipients open its messages or quietly mark them as junk and move on? A sender with years of clean history and passing checks sails in. A brand new, unknown sender, even one technically configured correctly, starts with no trust and has to earn it slowly, message by message, complaint by complaint. This is why a hijacked account is so dangerous. It inherits all the trust the real owner spent years building and turns it against the very people who learned to rely on it. The checks prove identity. Reputation decides how much that identity is actually worth, and the two together are far stronger than either alone. The arms race, of course the other side adapts, because it always does. Those who send deceptive mail lean on the weaknesses these checks cannot see. They register domains that look almost identical to a trusted one, a single character off, perfectly authenticated for a domain that is technically theirs but designed to fool the human eye. They compromise the real accounts of legitimate senders so the mail passes every check honestly because it genuinely came from the real system. The verification proves the message came from a domain. It cannot by itself prove that domain is honest or that its owner meant to send it. That gap is where the modern fight has moved. Why the defender has the edge. Even so, the advantage has shifted hard toward the receiver, and it is worth seeing why. Before these layers existed, anyone could trivially forge any sender, and the inbox was helpless. Now, forging a major, properly defended domain outright is genuinely difficult, because the seals and authorized sender lists cannot be faked without the secret keys. The attacker is pushed off the strong target and onto the weaker edges, lookalikes and hijacked accounts which are harder to pull off and easier to spot through reputation and reporting. The door that used to swing open for anyone now demands real proof, and that alone strips out an ocean of the crudest fakery. The double edge, it would be dishonest to call this purely good, so name the tension. The same strict gates that block impersonators also catch the legitimate but misconfigured. A small organization, a school, a charity that has not set up these published records correctly can find its perfectly real messages quietly binned, judged as fakes by a system that cannot tell careless from criminal. The strength of the wall is also its rigidity. And the complexity of getting all three layers right means a real divide has opened between the large, well-resourced senders who pass easily and the small ones who can vanish into spam through nothing worse than a technical mistake. There is a quiet centralizing pull in this too. When a handful of giant providers effectively decide what counts as a trustworthy sender, getting your mail delivered increasingly means playing by their rules, and the open anyone can run a mail server spirit the system was born with keeps narrowing. The gate that keeps out the impersonators also slowly raises the cost of simply being heard, what it is really about. So here is the part to sit with. Every message that reaches you has already passed through a silent trial you never witnessed, a check on whether the name on the envelope can actually be believed. Email began as a system built entirely on trust, with no proof of anything, and the hidden machinery we have bolted on since is a decades-long attempt to retrofit honesty onto something that never had it. It mostly works quietly, which is exactly why you never think about it. But understanding it changes how you read your own inbox. The next time a message feels slightly wrong, remember there is an invisible ledger behind it, one that was either satisfied or quietly uneasy before that message was ever placed in front of you. If this is the kind of thing you find yourself thinking about, the quiet machinery under the everyday internet, then this channel is your sort of place. There is no product to sell you here. It is just the systems, taken apart and explained by someone who has spent a long time on the inside of them. Subscribe and follow the rabbit hole. Next time we are going to look at the small padlock in your address bar, the one you have been taught to trust without ever asking who actually decides it is safe to show, how that promise is made, who makes it, and what happens when the strangers vouching for the whole web get it catastrophically wrong.